All right. My name is Pedro Moreira da Silva. I'm principal product designer. And today I want to talk about how can design lead product direction and not just support it. And for today, I thought about doing a hopefully smaller part of sharing, some ideas and maybe having more discussion with everyone here. And so based on Jonah's ask of ideas that we all had in our drawer sort of way and that we could help influence and be more design led, I picked two of them. So the first one is the public feature graveyard. And then the second is the outcome focused, release notes, which is actually something, this second one is something that I'll be working on starting next week. More the fe new feature awareness and having a design vision for that. But yeah, I like both. I wasn't able to decide, so I thought about, hey, how could, this work? And I prototyped a few things quickly for both of those ideas, and I wanted to share with all of you. So the first idea, the feature graveyard, is basically to make all of our feature depth visible. And there's a strong correlation between progressive subtraction and all-time great products. So the more we progressively subtract and remove things that are not useful, that are just adding clutter or weight to our product, both implementation and design wise, it will be better. And I would love to have a very easy to digest, page or series of pages where we can make that pain visible and maybe try to somehow, estimate the level of, benefits that we would have from removing that feature, setting or capability, and yeah, maybe just even if it's to spark a discussion. So I let me hop on to the prototype. So I put together this very rough prototype, using Figma Make. And so I love this. I love this icon, the feature graveyard. I still think it's quite a negative name because it seems like the features are already dead, which they could be in a way, right? But it's a little bit like this place where you're not dead yet, but you could be dead or you could come alive. I don't know. So what are the candidates? And so it was interesting because, a lot of the suggestions was to not only have a list of features that could be removed and that are candidates, and also, what is the usage of each feature, when it was added, and also the maintenance costs, which I think is maybe something that is easier for us to estimate this maintenance costs compared to the cognitive load that it adds to users or the more time that users need to spend going through a specific flow. Um, I also like that, for each feature, it suggested having an alternative. Okay, so if we do remove this, what is the alternative for the few users that still use this that we could recommend, which I think was an interesting suggestion. And then the analytics part of it. So the what is the basically the distribution of these candidates for removal across categories, and also the usage versus complexity analysis, if how much is it used versus its complexity. So I don't know. I thought this would be, if we had something like this, it could be useful. I'm still not sure if it would be something in the product. So using a series of work items that we can then have uh, GL, views for something like this. If we would build a specific, website that we would consume. But yeah, this is one of the things that I was experimenting with. And yeah, I'm open to hearing your feedback. I don't know if I'll have time or when I'll have time to pursue something like this. I know that there is some interest in having something like this that is very easy for people to eye in on and be able to act. Um, but yeah, if you have any other ideas and feedback, I'd love to go over that in a minute. The second idea that came up was the feature announcements or the release posts. So if we go to a release post today, um, you can see this indicator here of the length of the page. Um, I think that already tells you quite a bit of how dense this is, how many things are there, and how difficult it is to find things that really matter to you, right? So if you're just a developer, maybe some of these improvements and enhancements you don't care about. Maybe if you're an admin, you care about others. And it's just a very, very long list of all of these things that we've made improvements on, but it's not really digestible for someone that just stumbles upon this blog post. Um, we do have this other page called What's New, which I actually don't know how I got here. I think I just searched for it and it came up. And it does allow you to filter not only by versions, which is cool, but also filter by area of the product, basically, and what you might care about. And so you would filter these. Um, and this is just showing basically what we have more or less, or at least the highlights of the release post of the 18.9, which was here, but in a more digestible way. And actually, the content, I realized that it is different, which is also another thing that I think sometimes we end up doing in these release posts is that we write the enhancements many times, not always, but many times it talks about how things work and the more the what it does, but not necessarily what is the benefit of it? What is the thing that would want me to use certain capabilities or improvements? And again, it doesn't apply to all of them. You know, there are some that are well written, but this part, from what I've seen, it takes exactly the same or most of the same enhancements that are highlighted in the release post and writes it in a different format that is, I would say, more aligned with, you know, what someone might extract the benefit from each capability. So this is an interesting approach. In the end, there is this disconnect that we all know, which is how many people go to the website to read the release notes. So even if we have an amazing blog post, or even if we have an amazing public page of release posts, which we should, how do we do that in the product? And so uh, there is you know, this experiment which, you know, I just asked, you know, Figma Make to try to build something that would allow us to make this more about the new features, new changes for me personally. And so if we could improve the what's new drawer to not only have this filter of, okay, what is for me and not all updates, which right now we have all updates and it is more noise maybe than signal. Also have the ability to filter maybe by certain areas and uh, be very concise and very clear about what each feature does today and what it can do for you. And I think this could be something that is a little bit better compared to what we have today that speaks more to me specifically. Um, and finally, the thing that I think is also something I'll be working on starting next week is how can we activate features that are experimental or have basically these feature previews, which right now we don't have a really good system for that. There is some way in the preferences for you to enable and disable certain features for you personally, but how do we try to showcase these things for users that want to be early testers of certain capabilities? And so, again, like I don't particularly like the placement that Figma, you know, added here, but if we had this dialog that you could open from anywhere to get early access to experimental features, maybe even searching features, maybe even highlighting some of the ones that might be more applicable to me as a developer versus ones that are more applicable to an admin or I don't know. We could then be very clear about what these features do, maybe things that people should know about what happens when they enable this feature, and then yeah, just starting to enable them um, based on what the person wants. And we could also have some neat filters here. Um, One thing that is missing here in this mockup that I didn't include, sorry, this prototype would be easy way for people to give feedback on these features. So even if I'm not using the feature, I could go here to this feature preview and have a way to select a feature and provide feedback on it, which I think is something that we should streamline too. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit what I wanted to share. This is very open-ended, as you can see, but I'd love your any thoughts, feedback, or if you've thought about these things before, or even things like this, both feature previews and in-product updates or free feature graveyards that you've seen in other places that we could learn from. So I can take a look at that. I'll stop sharing now and I can share again if someone wants.
Thank you. That was super cool. Sayo, you have the first question if you want to go.
Yeah. So first off, I think that's great. I particularly like the feature graveyard name pending, I suppose. Um,
Feature
it's-
purgatory is a good one. I think that's what I was hinting at.
Yeah, and I think that could encourage us to have a better approach to how we read data, as well. So I think it's more of a question about how you feel about how we are tracking data and visualizing this data right now. One scenario, for example, that I'm thinking about, it's like settings. We have a bunch of settings, but how easy is it to know which settings are being adopted right now and which ones we can drop? I know you're looking into the feature side, but internally, do we have this visibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. My understanding is that we have to intentionally track almost everything, except for GitLab.com, where there is a select group of people that can access the production database or at least a replica of that database that is anonymized. Um, they can have access to live, database information about this feature or that setting. Um, but sometimes it doesn't really tell you if it's being used, right? The database is only going to tell you maybe the last time that certain values changed. When sometimes what we want is events, and sometimes events are just in the front end and maybe they don't get replicated in the back end in the database. So I think short answer is really that I don't think we're doing um, the best job we could. I think there's always things we could do to improve, and definitely what you said makes sense that it could encourage us to have more visibility. And I would also add that it would be helpful to have a central place for these things that collects data from across the product. Because what I've seen sometimes in the past is certain teams talking about their feature X or setting Y just in relation to what they own. And so if their monthly active users of their feature area is, I don't know, 100 people, and they see, oh, we have 10 people using, only 10 people using this feature, then they're like, oh, I mean, it's 10% of all of the feature, all of the users that we support, right? So maybe there's nothing wrong. But if you look at that in aggregate and then see, well, in all of the products, your feature team has the features with the least amount of usage, what does that tell us? So I think we need both that in context of the whole platform and also in the context of each team. And right now, I think we've been perhaps leaning too much on specific teams building those dashboards and everything that is just for them, and they don't see the whole big picture of what our users see when they use the whole product.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Saga. Nick, thanks
Yeah.
for the question.
So these are all like super exciting. I'm really glad to see like we're thinking about this. I was curious with the early access and like being able to opt in. Um, if we have any sense of like whether that would be just for like user level features, or we have some features where you kind of have to have everyone use it for it to make sense, right? Like would we also be able to do that at the group or instance level, basically aligned with our feature flag levels?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm not really sure. I've just started thinking about this now, but it's a great point that we should consider. I would imagine that maybe there are certain features that we could include there for um, people that have permissions to enable them at the group level or project level, that we could also surface them there. So maybe it could be a one-stop shop for all feature previews or experimental features, and to also yeah, nudge people to say, oh, you have permissions to enable this for your team. Why why don't you give it a shot, right? And so
Yeah,
that could be one way. I don't know if that we would have to figure out how that could be scalable, and or even if it makes sense like that. But um, I like the idea of having this central place for everything that is experimental, almost like GitLab,
yeah.
GitLab Labs. That's feature labs. I mean, we could call it feature lab, because I mean we already have lab in the name, so why don't we play with it?
Cool. Yeah, that's I think of a few cases where we've run into that where customers like, hey, I saw this issue about like this feature flag, but I'm on .com, so I can't enable it because, and so if you had a way to go in through the group and be like, cool, just toggle it on. So, sometimes we do it for them, but that puts us in kind of an awkward position of like managing their feature flags and stuff.
Yeah.
The other question I had was just around like feedback methods. I think you kind of briefly mentioned this, but I'm curious if part of what you're looking at is kind of that next step of like you found a feature, you tried it, you want to give us feedback. Right now, we lean really heavily on feedback issues, which are kind of a pain to triage. They're a little bit like all over the place. They kind of spiral out of control sometimes. And we don't usually have a lot of good data. Like somebody leaves a comment and you're like, I don't know who this person is. What company are they from? Are they self-managed? And then you're like trying to get them to respond to you just to tell you like you found a bug, but is it like what's the context? And like it's pretty unusual when you look at other products, right? Like usually you get like a form, they know who you are, it's coming through that. Like, is that something we're looking at, or is that outside of the scope of your work?
It is outside of the scope, but I think it could be another thing that we could follow up on, another thread that we could try to explore. Um, Yeah, I think we've always leaned more towards the boring solution of, hey, we are GitLab, we use GitLab, there are GitLab issues. Why don't everyone else in the world also comment on our issues like we do? Like it's all open. What is the problem? And there's a big problem, right? People, don't want to escape and move outside of their context, or even if they're using self-managed and dedicated. Um, yeah, maybe there could be the ability to have like a mix where there is the ability for you to provide feedback on a feature without leaving your context, right? With those dialogues that in the product you give feedback, but also maybe even in that feedback modal, we could or dialogue, we could point users to, hey, if you want to publicly voice your support or concerns, here's the feedback issue as well for this particular, feature, for example. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Even part of some products I've seen, it's even part of the like feature announcement, right? They do it like a blog, and then you can leave comments with votes on the blog, and then that's usually in tandem with like in product. And like I saw the chat like mention of what if you don't want to express things. Like I've run into that too, where users like, well, I want to show this to you, but I can't post a screenshot publicly in the chat because it's like I don't want to expose anything. So
yeah,
then we end up in this like little dance of like, okay, here's my email, you can like send it to me, and like, they may or may not respond because it's not their top priority. But if they
yeah.
could do that from the
Even
start.
even for us, right? If we want to provide feedback on things that are in the product and maybe I don't know, for some reason we want to, keep it confidential or don't want to be, tied to us specifically, how do you do that, right? So yeah, that's a good point. Maybe something to look into later.
That kind of links to what you were saying about data, Pedro. I feel like it would benefit us a lot more if users could give feedback after a particular event is triggered. And that's something that like I mentioned to the research team. I think it was like my first 2 months in GitLab. Like, why are we not able to trigger a feedback form after a particular journey is completed, after a particular event is triggered? That is way more valuable even for us as well. Like I see that the research team is doing a lot of work with like overall feedback, CSAT feedback, but that doesn't give me insight about a particular task that the user
Yeah.
completed.
It's not contextual.
Yeah, yeah.
I, I did just one more point, which is very much tied to that, because Nick Casey's on this call, and I we were just talking about this yesterday. It's like the only people who come to our feedback issues is when they have a problem, right? It's like I have a bug, I have a complaint, I hate you, you've changed my workflow. Like it doesn't really give us this context of like, what about the rest of the people that are like, oh, this works exactly like I thought. Cool. Like and like that's where we need these like in product, like what is it, like the SEQ or whatever, like a single question, like
Yeah.
this did it or it didn't work or whatever, that you could just, I don't know, like some method where we could track these things where we might get a little bit of that, like, oh, actually most people like it, even though these are like vocal haters are over here, like, they have valid feedback sometimes, but like we want to balance that a little bit with everyone else, and that can be hard to do with a push feedback instead of like a pull feedback. Sorry, I took us a little bit off topic with
No,
feedback, but
it's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is more weight to maybe something we can work on. And I mean, if anyone here has time and willingness and feels this pain in a very particular way, why don't you try to run with it and talk with your manager to find some time to work on this and then provide some, design-led, approach for this.
I feel like there is even an experimentation that we could run that like if you finish a particular task and that triggers like a success banner, why are we not asking for feedback there, for example, and see if people would give feedback in there? Mm, mm. Anyway, sorry, off topic again.
Okay. Um, Gina, do you still have time for Diego's question?
Yes, we have 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'll just be super quick. Firstly, that was really awesome, Pedro, and I think we should have a naming competition because I really like the graveyard, but I could hear how it sounds like negative. But yeah, I suppose from my side, and you may have touched on the answer already, but just how does it handle if it's giving you low usage, but it's a feature that's maybe critical for like an enterprise user, and it's maybe part of the reason why they've upgraded to Ultimate or whatever it is. How would we kind of measure that? And I suppose another part of this is the proactivity. Would it be the responsibility on our side? Would we be saying, hey, just a monthly reminder, these are your like low usage features. What do you want, Or is that something that would probably lay more on the customer side?
Yeah. Yeah, I think low usage is just one angle to look at it. If we, in our daily lives, we encounter things like emergency buttons in elevators or fire extinguishers, things like that that are very, very rarely. Maybe if all goes well, they're never used. So the usage is very, very low, as it should be, right? But on the other hand, it is very important that they are maintained and that there's an investment to keep them working and evolving and so on. So yeah, low usage is just one lens to look at the features. We would have to look, holistically. That is why I think in general, we just have to think about feature depth. Like, is this creating more depth than value? Are we, uh, is this making us owe more to our users, to the product, to performance than it is creating value? And that's the assessment that we need to make. And yeah, I don't know if there will be some kind of formula for it, but at least a formula to make a first suggestion should be possible.
Cool. Makes sense.
We're
Awesome.
on time. Thanks, Theo.
Nice. Yeah, thank you, Pedro. I'm gonna stop the recording.